Good evening. Our top story tonight comes from Gaza, where a grave and urgent warning has been issued. The Israeli Defense Minister announced what he called a final warning to the residents of Gaza City, urging them to leave immediately for the south. This comes as intense shelling continues to rock the northern areas of the Gaza Strip, turning parts of the city into rubble and leaving tens of thousands of civilians in peril. From early morning, the skyline over Gaza City was once again filled with thick columns of grey smoke, a stark reminder that the bombardment has not let up. On the Israeli-Gaza border, plumes of smoke rose in quick succession, filling the horizon with an almost unbroken haze. These images, captured by AFP correspondents and widely broadcast across the world, underline the intensity of the strikes and the pressure on the civilian population to flee. In a televised statement on Wednesday, the Israeli Defense Minister declared that the army would tighten what he described as the security cordon around the city. He warned, "We will not hesitate to expand operations unless civilians move to the designated safe zones in the south." His remarks have been interpreted by observers as the clearest sign yet that a large-scale ground operation could follow if the evacuation order is not heeded. For residents inside Gaza City, this new warning brought both fear and confusion. Many families began to pack their belongings into small bags and suitcases, ready to move at a moment's notice. Others, especially those without vehicles or relatives in the south, remained trapped, unsure how they would make the journey under constant threat of renewed bombardment. Witnesses reported long lines of people at gas stations, while others searched desperately for trucks or buses that could carry them and their children to safety. Humanitarian organisations have sounded alarms over the deteriorating conditions in hospitals, schools and temporary shelters. Aid workers say that many of the displaced have already fled multiple times over the past weeks, moving from one shattered neighbourhood to another as the fighting shifted. Supplies of food, clean water and medicine are running dangerously low, and officials warn that the situation could tip into a full-blown humanitarian crisis if large numbers of people are forced to move again in the coming days. International reaction to the warning was swift. Several governments and the United Nations issued urgent calls for the protection of civilians and appealed for humanitarian corridors to remain open. Diplomats urged both sides to show restraint, warning that an even larger exodus from Gaza City could overwhelm the already strained aid network in the south of the enclave. While officials and leaders exchanged statements, the situation on the ground told its own story. Continuous shelling could be heard through the night in the northern districts. From vantage points along the border, one could see entire apartment blocks darkened, their windows blown out by blasts, with only the glow of fires breaking the darkness. Residents described nights filled with fear, sirens wailing, buildings shaking and streets deserted except for the occasional ambulance braving the danger. Military analysts note that this stage of the conflict marks a significant shift in Israel's strategy. By tightening the cordon around Gaza City and issuing evacuation orders, the Israeli army appears determined to isolate militant strongholds in the north and cut off their supply lines. However, critics warn that these tactics carry an enormous human cost. Densely populated urban neighbourhoods are difficult to evacuate quickly, and the line between military target and civilian shelter is often blurred in the chaos. For the people of Gaza City, the choices are stark and agonizing. Stay in their homes and risk being caught in the crossfire, or leave everything behind and head south with no guarantee of safety or shelter. Some residents had already moved days before the final warning was issued, having anticipated that the conflict would escalate further. But others hesitated, hoping the fighting would subside, only to find themselves facing a shrinking window to escape. Aid agencies report severe shortages of clean water, food and fuel. Hospitals in the north are struggling to keep generators running to power life-saving equipment. Doctors describe harrowing scenes of patients too ill to be moved, including newborns in incubators and the elderly on ventilators. The World Health Organization has appealed for urgent international efforts to facilitate the safe transfer of critical patients and to keep supply lines open. Humanitarian convoys attempting to reach the north have faced difficulties due to damaged roads and continued shelling. The movement of civilians southward has been slowed by long traffic jams at checkpoints, where anxious families wait for hours in hopes of being allowed to pass. Aid workers warn that the combination of disrupted transportation, ongoing military activity, and dwindling supplies is pushing the region to the brink of a deeper crisis. Global diplomatic pressure has been building. Several European leaders have called for renewed dialogue, emphasizing that the protection of civilians must be paramount. The United States has expressed grave concern about the shrinking humanitarian space in the north and has urged Israel to exercise restraint even as it pursues its military objectives. Calls for an immediate ceasefire have so far gone unheeded, but discussions continue behind closed doors. The wider regional context adds another layer of urgency. Observers note that each flare-up of violence in Gaza reverberates across the Middle East, raising fears of broader instability. Neighbouring countries are bracing for potential refugee flows, while international aid agencies are appealing for additional funding and logistical support to respond to what could become a protracted displacement crisis. Through all this, families in Gaza City are forced to make decisions in hours that may affect their lives for years to come. Parents describe the heartbreak of leading their children away from homes where generations of their families have lived, uncertain whether they will ever return. Many say they have left behind loved ones who are unable or unwilling to move, the elderly, the sick, or simply those too afraid to risk the journey. As the shelling continues, scenes along the border remain grimly similar, plumes of smoke rising in steady intervals, the skyline marred by distant flashes of explosions. The images from AFP TV have become symbols of a conflict that once again places civilians in the crosshairs of history and geopolitics. For international viewers, the events unfolding in Gaza serve as a reminder of the enduring volatility of the region. Analysts caution that without a sustainable political solution, each round of conflict deepens the cycle of mistrust and despair. The latest evacuation order, they say, underscores how quickly the line between military campaign and humanitarian emergency can blur. As the situation evolves, the next few days will be critical. Much will depend on whether residents of Gaza City can move safely, whether humanitarian corridors remain open, and whether both sides can avoid further escalation. The decisions made in this short window of time will shape not only the immediate humanitarian outlook, but also the trajectory of the conflict in the months ahead. For now, the warning has been issued, the bombardment continues, and tens of thousands of civilians are caught in the middle, facing an uncertain and perilous future. The world watches closely, hoping for a breakthrough that could halt the violence and ease the suffering, but bracing for the possibility that the crisis will deepen before any resolution is found. This has been our special report on the crisis in Gaza. We will continue to monitor developments closely and bring you updates as events unfold.